So let's get started here. More people are trickling in, so that makes me very happy. One last time before we get started, uh, feel free to tell me where you're from, but before you do, change the to all panelists and attendees so that you can talk to one another. And someone else just showed up. So feel free to do that, and I will get started. This is ProPresenter 6. This is one of the latest versions of ProPresenter 6, and I am on Mac OS. Here, just a second. Mojave 10.14.6 to be exact. This is on a 2017 MacBook Pro. So the Windows version is similar. It's about 80% the same, 80 to 90%. There are a couple of little things you've got to know, but in general, this should look fairly familiar to you. First off, I want to go into ProPresenter preferences and talk to you about that. So if we go into ProPresenter preferences, then display, you'll notice that I have three displays here. I have SD, that's the stage display. I have output, that's the one the congregation would see. And then I have this one in the middle. Notice the little bar on top? That indicates that that's kind of the default display. And on a MacBook Pro, that's you'd want the built-in display to be used for that unless you had 4 displays. So the one without any label, that's your control screen, and that's what you're looking at right here. Off to my left is the stage display. If I turn that on, off to my right, I've put the output screen here, and you'll notice that I've got it set to full screen output. Here I can configure the stage display if I want, and you'll notice that I have multiple stage displays that I have created for different purposes here. And the stage display is really a powerful feature in ProPresenter. It enables you to send not only the text of what's on the screen right now, but the next slide. So that's really helpful for singers. They can know what's coming up next, assuming that the person who's leading the music isn't either moved by the spirit or forgets where they are despite it being in front of them, both of which happen, and it doesn't matter which it is. It's from the operator's perspective, it's the same thing. Unless you also get the heads up from the Holy Spirit that something's changing, you don't know what's happening. So that's a valuable little feature of the stage display. I just turned mine on by clicking Enable Stage Display. Scale output to fit display is a good little feature here that will make it to where those match natively. As I say, I've got 3. You really can run ProPresenter with 1, although I wouldn't recommend it. 2 is really what you want. And if we go into Mac system preferences, this is one thing that I do want to talk about, because occasionally I'll talk to someone and they'll say, ProPresenter is only showing 1 display or only showing 2 displays. And the problem with that is, if ProPresenter can't see multiple displays, always start with the computer, because if the computer can't see multiple displays, then ProPresenter has no chance. All this does is it says what goes where in ProPresenter. It doesn't assign displays. It doesn't enable the displays to exist to the computer. So that's always a good start. Most of the time, this mirror displays checkbox, again, I'm in Mac OS, you won't want that checked. But you'll also notice that this arrangement looks very similar to this arrangement. And that's because ProPresenter takes the boxes from here. And let me show you a little trick. In here, I can click on that and see the red outline around that display. Any of the displays, you can't see the one on the left and the right, but any of the displays, when you click on them, it shows that. So that would tell you. And I can just as easily drag this up here for the main output, put it in front of me. But if I do that, then I'd have to put the mouse up to go to it, or below, whatever. I can arrange these kind of like they are in physical space where it makes sense to me. So that's the first thing I want to do. I'm going to close out system preferences and get back here. And that's, maybe we'll touch on some more of this stuff a little bit later. Let me get back my chat. But in general, that's what I want to talk about in the ProPresenter preferences. Anytime I answer a question, if I want you to look at system preferences, I'll say system preferences. And if I want you to look at ProPresenter preferences, I'll actually say ProPresenter preferences. The fact that they both have preferences in the name can make things confusing, so I do that. I've got a little Zoom webinar bar right up here, so I'm going to drag this down just a little bit so that I can see some of the stuff here. So in this menu bar, I've got both the icons and the words turned on so that it's less confusing. Clear all clears everything, taking your output to black. Slides clears just the slides layer, the stuff that's displayed from right in here. Backgrounds clears the backgrounds, which typically you add from here, but you'll notice this has what appears to be a background, but in fact, I doubt this will clear. Yeah, see, that didn't clear. That's because this is a template where Renewed Vision put that picture on the same layer as the slides. Props is a layer above the slides. If you think of ProPresenter as having layers on top of one another, most people think of the slides layer and they also think of the background layer. But there are 3 layers above the slides layer: the props layer, or is it just 2? Props, then masks, I think, are the 2 above the slides layer. And below the slides layer, we have the media layer, which typically you think of as background, but that's also where the foreground videos live. There's also the live video layer, which is below that, and also a colorful background. So those are the different layers you have in ProPresenter, and depending on where you put stuff, you get different things happening. So if you were to put a video in the slides layer, when you click on the next slide, that video will go away, just like text would go away. So DD was asking, what would you use the props layer for? Well, it's intended for something that's persistent across your entire presentation or a segment. So you could put like your church logo in the lower right-hand corner. That would be a good use for it. If there was something that needed to stay up, like maybe during the announcements, you want a kind of welcome message to show up, and that stays even though you're changing between slides. That could do it. So let me show you the props layer. View props, which is Control P on a Mac. And so let's see here. Let's just put that there. That's just a box. So if I clear that out, you'll notice now that no matter what slide I go to, it's there. That might actually be another good troubleshooting tip, is if you find something that is there no matter what you do, you clear your slides, it stays there. You clear your background, it stays there. Try clearing props, because that's one place where you can have that as an issue, is if you put it there. So that could have been the church logo, that could have been anywhere on the screen. And since they're persistent, no matter what slide is up, you can use that to do things like make a Family Feud game where you make the background for Family Feud, and once you put it up, it stays up. So let's say they choose the number 1 answer, then they choose the number 5 answer. So you can put the prop up for each of those answers. And then when they go to 2, you can put up prop number 2, and number 1 and number 5 will stay up. So that's a little bit of a hack that a lot of children's ministries and youth ministries like, is kind of using ProPresenter to make games like that. Because slides because it's meant for songs and sermon notes, as soon as you go from one slide to the other, it changes. It removes the previous one and adds the second one. So yeah, that is awesome. That's something that they added in ProPresenter 6, I believe. Or was it 5? Might have been 5. That they added props, and gives you a lot of power there. And I see we've got even more people joining us. Welcome. Make sure you change in the chat box, change all panelists to all panelists and attendees. In case you have questions, other people can chime in on your questions when they see them. So that's that. You can also clear the audio here. Let me see, where is the, let me pop out the audio. We have on the side here, you can play different songs. I've got this, so that's a Striper song. Well, they're both Striper songs because I'm 46 and I was a teenager in the 80s. Late 80s, but 80s nonetheless. So I could start that playing and then clear it out using that clear button if I wanted to. So let me go ahead and hide that again. New creates a new presentation. I also like to do down here in the lower left-hand corner. This gives you the option to do all kinds of new stuff. New document, sermon notes or a song, that would be what you click there. New playlist, that's like your order of worship. New group folder, so if you want to organize them, we just finished Christmas. So let's say that you want to do 2019 Christmas. You can put that in there and keep them organized that way. And then, you know, maybe later on you want to clear them out as you get a lot of folders in here. You go, oh, well, I need to clear these out. That would be a good way to go through and say, oh, it hasn't been Christmas 2019 in 6 months or a year or whatever. So that's another little thing. So going back to this preview window here, this shows you what's on your main screen, unless you can also go to Command, I think it's 4. Nope. This is what I wanted. Command 3 shows you the stage display. So if you're curious what the stage display looks like at any time and you don't have a dedicated monitor, In my church, we have a dedicated monitor, so the person running ProPresenter can just glance up and tell what the stage display is doing, because you can add cues to change the stage display. Because while this might be good for when they're singing, it might not be as good for the message. So you might have a different layout. And a good way to change that is you click on the slide that you want it to change on, scroll down to add cue, and you can change the stage display layout right here. So I could change that to the default stage display layout when I click on this slide, and you'll see that it changes. And then let's say I want to go to, let's go to this one. On the sermon, I want to change it to a different stage display layout, add cue, stage display layout. Let's do notes only. So there's no notes in this particular one, but that's another stage display layout. So you can have it basically automatically click once you have it all set up. Next, again, lowering that so that I can see it a little bit better. We have the video image bin. That is this stuff down here. Some people like to turn that off. If everything's already set and you're not going to change it, by all means, turn it off when you're actually running ProPresenter. But if not, if you're going to change things, then it might be worth having that open. By default, you have just these two, the background and the foreground. Backgrounds are persistent. Let's see here. Yeah, that should have changed. I wonder if there is something going on like that's also on this slides layer. But anyway, so that is a background. Yep, there we go. So the background is persistent unless it's replaced or removed. So in the case of a song, I only need to have that on the first slide, and that will change back over to the main output. That will continue on this slide. Notice how we don't see it here, but it is in fact there. And this one, which is all kinds of funky, that's a previous webinar where I was showing all kinds of funkiness that you could do. It stays there. Foreground videos, on the other hand, they don't support the slides. So what, who was it that it was asking that? Sheila was asking the purpose of a foreground. So let's say you've got a video clip. Maybe it's a video that's talking about something that's coming up in your church. Or maybe it's a video clip that your pastor wants to show during the message, because there's a movie that has a piece that illustrates the point. Kind of in line with the Apostle Paul quoting poets of the day, which he did. It's in the Bible. So the Apostle Paul quoted poets who were not Christians, who were not even Jews, in some of his writings. So along those lines, maybe you want to play a video clip. A foreground video would do that. Now you can add a foreground. This is a countdown. You can add a foreground video by itself in right here. I almost never do that, because if you create a new document, let's call this foreground, and you put it in there, you'll notice this icon is different from the icon right here. This has two things stacked on top of one another. That means that it has a background, and this one didn't actually put it in there. Okay, this one has what looks like a clapper from the movies, and that means that it's a foreground video. So what this will do is that will not be persistent when you go to the next slide. So if I started here and then I click on there, it goes away. So I could have, if I was going to put that into my pre-service loop, so let's say I have all these still images one after another, and 5 seconds of the men's prayer breakfast, followed by 5 seconds of the youth trip to the local amusement park, followed by a welcome from the pastor. As a video, if you do right click at a go to next timer, on a foreground video, the go to next timer, I'm going to set that to 0. A go to next timer, here, let me start that over again and I'll skip to the end. The go to next timer on a foreground video is how long after the video ends before it goes to the next slide. On a background, it is how long the slide itself is up. So that's some of the reasons you would use a foreground versus a background video, and some of the differences between those. In my own church, I wasn't the one that made the presentation. I had someone that put the slides in the pre-service loop, that they put them in as backgrounds, which was fine during the pre-service, right? The problem was not all of them were backgrounds. And one, we have multiple services. We have 2 normally. And so one time we ended the pre-service loop on a slide that was a foreground video, or a foreground image rather. So when we went to the first slide in the first song, it wasn't back behind there. But when we went the other service, when we went to the first slide in the first song, we still had the background. So what I did instead of changing it was real click. I was directing right then. So I slid over and I right clicked on the first slide and I added a right click, add cue, clear action cue, a clear background cue to get rid of the old background. So should we have that problem? I think it was first service we had the problem with the background slide that should have been a foreground. So I added that in between. And second service, we wouldn't have had it, but we were good just in case. So you have a lot of flexibility there. Messages, this is a powerful feature. If you want to send a message to the congregation, a lot of times a good use for this is numbers from your children's ministry. Like if the children are checked in and they each get their unique number and the parents get a sticker with it on or whatever, then if the kid has some sort of issue where they need the parent, instead of making an announcement, you can just put up the number. In ProPresenter 6, you have even more power. So if I go to message here and I go visible, oops, That's not the one I want. Let me add a new one. Okay, and let's call that visible on network. If I do that, I can basically make it so, let's add this. These tokens are like variables in math, so I can just drag them over. So now, since it's visible on network, if I go into preferences here and network, if anyone in your kids ministry goes to network, the network name and then :port on their web browser, then they can type in the number and it will show up as a notification. If they're on, and they can do that from their phone, they can do that from a computer. It's not secure, except that it's security through obscurity. You have to know what the computer is, what the port number is. So it's going to be difficult. Oh, and you have to be on site. So it would be difficult for someone outside of the church to first get into the church's network. You've got a firewall for that. And secondly, to find which computer has this and which port on that computer will do that. So that's another powerful feature in ProPresenter 6. Another thing that messages do is if we go into here, and let me show this message, show message. So that is a countdown to service, and that's built into ProPresenter 6. That's how long until 9 p.m. because one day I was doing a tutorial at 9 p.m. That's the only reason I've done that. But I can set that up to be really any time. You know, right now it says 9 p.m., but it could just as easily be 9 a.m. if that's when your church starts. And so it's 20 hours until 9 a.m. here, 20 hours at 26 minutes, etc. So, and messages are on the props layer. So in answer to your question from earlier, Dee Dee, that's another use of the props layer. So if I want to clear out the countdown clock, I can just clear the prop, and that'll do that as well. Well, I'm glad you think it's cool. I wish I could take credit for ProPresenter. I just happen to be a big fan. I know the people that programmed it, but I've never worked for them. I just love it, and so I spend a lot of time learning about it, and I also love to teach, so that's why I do this. Another thing, you see where it says Pro Remote, there is both iOS and Android apps for your phone that can remotely control ProPresenter. So that is a great little feature where you can pop up your phone and control it that way. And it's password protected, so not anyone can control your phone, just people that have the password. So you could have your pastor with this little app and control it during the message. Maybe you don't want that. Don't tell your pastor about it. But if your pastor's like, I want to control the message with my phone, that's it. So Pro Remote is available in the iOS store for iPhone and iPad, or it's available in the Google Play Store for Android. So that's where you can get those. And they are an additional cost, but they're not super expensive. You can also use just a regular presentation remote, assuming that that remote sends right arrow and left arrow buttons with the buttons. Occasionally I'll find one that does up and down, and the up and down arrow keys, if we watch over here, I'm pressing down, it goes between items in your playlist. So that's not what you want to do at all. You need right arrow, which is what I'm pressing right now. The best of those remotes, by the way, is super expensive, but it will work every time unless the battery dies, and that is the DSAN remote. So I will tell you that the cheapest one of those is $300, but if you've got a situation where others won't work, the $30 one won't work, save up and then you'll be happy when it works every time. Let's continue on here. Store, you can buy media there. Social media, this used to be both Twitter and Instagram, but then Facebook bought Instagram and turned off the API. So now it's just Twitter. And that's not something that Renewed Vision can do anything about unless they went with a hack. There are some third-party companies that have hacky ways of doing it, but they tend to get broken. And I think that, I don't know for sure, but I think that Renewed Vision just decided, we're going to not do that because we don't want it to work one day and then it doesn't work the next, and it takes us another few months to figure out a new hack to make it work. So they did that. Templates, this will save you a ton of time. If you create a, let's say that scripture needs to look one way and songs need to look another way. So actually I did that backwards. So this is actually sermon notes. What you can do is you can create one that looks like you want it to look, right click, template, scroll all the way down and select new template group. It'll ask you to give it a name. You'll see that I have a few that are not the default ones, and then you can select all and apply a template. So let me do that. Right click, template, and let's do, what's one? Let's do this one. And you'll notice how they all change at once. So that could save you some time as well with getting rid of things that do not, or reformatting scripture or reformatting songs all at once. I showed that when I was in Washington, D.C., which we talked about before I started the tutorial. I showed that to the person who'd hired me. He's like, that just saved me like hours. I know. ProPresenter is very powerful. So format bar, if you need to just change something real quick, that's a good way to do the formatting. I really like quick edit for changing typos real quick. Like if there was a mistake here, let's say that you had inadvertently typed in a lowercase h, and you're on this slide right here and you notice it, more than once I have right-clicked, quick edit, and fixed something when I was just a slide or two away. Don't hit carriage return unless you needed to. And then that fixes that. So we're about 40 minutes in. I'll answer some questions here in just a second. I want to show you some stuff real quick before we get back to more questions, and I show you even more stuff on ProPresenter if we don't have questions. So this is Church Tech U. It has all my courses. You'll notice that we've been talking for 40 minutes, but I really haven't even scratched the surface. I haven't gotten into any of the advanced stuff. In fact, I've just kind of touched on the ProPresenter 6 Operators course and the ProPresenter 6 Creation course. And those are right here. So you'll see the curriculum for the ProPresenter 6 Operators course, when to change lyrics and how to jump ahead and back, how to find your mouse. This is something that is so powerful that I made a t-shirt about it. And that's not metaphorical. I actually made a t-shirt about it. You can buy it on Amazon. Backgrounds versus foregrounds and working with video. So Sheila, that lesson would have answered that question. Turning on and off the output, quickly editing a typo, controlling only the stage display. Do you know that you can basically freeze the output even when it has a moving background? The moving background keeps playing, but you turn off your control of it, and you can change the lyrics. So this would be great for an anthem or a perform song, whatever your church calls them, where maybe you want to put up lyrics for your choir or your musicians to sing, but you don't want them to go out on the side. So that's a little thing. More about props. I know Dee Dee, you were asking about props. That was that lesson. So that is that particular course. And this is the creation course. So this is kind of the before you get to church kind of stuff. So your first presentation, working with text, working with video, the difference between audio effects and tracks. I didn't even touch about that. I only showed you audio tracks, but you could imagine if you were doing like a dramatic thing, you might want audio effects. We just had a Christmas thing where we were talking about all the other ways that our culture talks about Christmas. And so we showed a little bit of a Christmas Carol. We showed a little bit of, we didn't sing a Christmas Carol. I'm talking the Ebenezer Scrooge, Charles Dickens thing. A little bit about the Grinch, a little bit about Santa Claus. And then, of course, the true meaning of Christmas is Jesus. Well, for the Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens piece, we had thunder and lightning. So an audio effect would have made sense there. Creating and scheduling pre-service loops. In ProPresenter, you have the ability to schedule things. So that's pretty cool. Showing YouTube videos, this is not available anywhere else. And the reason is YouTube doesn't want you to do it. Now, I will say that I think that if you get specific written permission from the copyright owner, that's perfectly fine. And I would get them to send me a copy of the video, maybe a Dropbox link or whatever, but there are other ways to do it. So YouTube doesn't want me to talk about that. So that's no longer available on YouTube. So slide element transitions, showing websites as slides. Let's say your church got a new website. You want to put in a slide of that to say, hey, check out our new website. Share it with your friends that don't know Jesus, etc. So that is another one. And those are all available in Church Tech U, my online training community. And as part of that, in addition to getting all of these courses, there is also a private Facebook group where you get not messages from my in-laws like was just there, but you do get direct access to me. I welcome you and I answer questions and we have discussions and such in there. And right now, until 2020, I'm running a special where you can get $20 off. You lock that in. So as long as you're a member, you'll get the $20 off. So instead of it being $49.97 a month, you can do it for $29.97 a month. But let's say you want to save even more. For $297 a year, which is basically 2 months free, then you can do that. So you're saving $200 a year off the normal $497 price. So you can get that at trinitydigitalmedia.lpages.co.li, or I believe it is tdm.fyi/20 for 2020, I think. We'll try that. I just made this. Oh, that's not it. So let me just paste in this whole link and I'll get you the short link later. And you can learn all this stuff. Most of these videos are like 5-7 minutes. So in your spare time, let's say you got 5 minutes before you're leaving for lunch, watch a video, pick up something. Also, this is a church-wide license. So as you get new volunteers, you can hook them up with the ProPresenter training and you can do it. And you'll notice that it's not only ProPresenter, it's primarily ProPresenter, but I've got Video School 101 where I talk about video, troubleshooting techniques. I include my 1080p HD seamless loops for you. ProPresenter 6 for pastors and teachers. If your pastor insists on making PowerPoint presentations that look like they were made in 1989 with human being clip art and all, I talk directly to your pastor because I have an MDiv. I went to seminary. So I talk to your pastor heart to heart about the theological reasons why that's a mistake. And it's not just design. There's actually some stuff in the Bible as well about who should do what and why. So there's that. And I don't just curse the darkness. I light a candle where I say, okay, this is what I would do if I were you. Starting with someone that can only do a text document all the way to someone that wants to learn how to do ProPresenter. So I have a course just for them. Hacks, tips, and tricks. The game that I told you about with Family Feud, for example, that's included in that course. If you're looking to buy a computer, I give you some tips there. YouTube for churches, you might know that I've got a little bit of a YouTube channel. Some stuff for live streaming and how to use ProPresenter for live streaming. And as part of this, everyone gets advanced access to my the commercial free, no me talking about church tech, just the tutorials. So you get advanced access to that and the live Q&As that I do monthly for my members, which are like this, only it's not hit and miss about how many people show up. It's going to be, fewer, so you're more likely to be able to ask questions. So I did want to tell you about that and offer you that special deal. That this is the first time I've talked about that publicly. So if you're interested, that's for the rest of the year. 12:01 a.m. on January 1st, it goes away. So I'd go ahead and take advantage of that if it interests you at all. And in the meantime, let's go and talk more about ProPresenter and some of the stuff. Occasionally I run into someone that has volume issues with ProPresenter. Either this got turned down, always check this icon. Notice that I just turned it down and there's no little sound waves coming from it. With it turned up, there are sound waves. This icon also, if you don't have output, a lot of times people will say, oh, let's restart ProPresenter. Well, if you've done that and it doesn't work, it could be that the output is just off. Output off, red icon that says off. Output on, green icon that says on. So you want to know that as well. Apparently my voice is failing me just a little bit, so I'm going to drink a little bit more of my coffee. So this is an example of a playlist that I created in ProPresenter. You'll notice that I have Amazing Grace in here, and I tweaked some of this. This is one of the built-in themes, but I thought that those words are awfully teeny tiny. So I made them larger. This is sermon notes. Let me actually go to the Bible. I believe it's Control B on the Mac. It is. So I used to think that all you could do is bring up this and only show one at a time. Let's say I wanted to show John 3:16. I could click on that directly. And then if I wanted to show Genesis 1:1, I could do that. And I thought, well, that's fine if your pastor calls for a verse that you have had no heads up on. But what if you want to put that into stuff? And that is located down here. You see this gear right here. You click on that and you have three choices. Save as a document makes it its own document. So it puts it in the library over here, just like I've got the foreground document, I've got the melody test document. Acts 26:24, that's how I created that. Copy to current document, whatever I have chosen over here. So if I click this and then I close out, you'll notice that all of a sudden Genesis 1:1 is here. So that's actually a fairly helpful thing. If I go back into Bibles and choose the third choice, save to selected playlist. So let's say that it's a long scripture passage, or even one verse, but you want to create it just by itself. So the first one only puts it in the library. The second one puts it in whatever is selected right here. And the third one creates its own thing with the scripture title. So if I do that, you'll notice that Genesis 1:1 showed up here. Now I can get out of here. So that can save you some time when you're making sermon notes as well. Another thing, yes, I did that good. Arrangements here, you see that little button there? When you click on that, I'm going to go to Arrangement Manager and I'm going to get rid of this test one. So I'm going to add a new arrangement. Let's call this test. And you'll know that by default it adds what's in the master arrangement. But I can then click and drag to add more stuff, or if I decide I don't want it, I can click on that X. And that is this arrangement versus the master arrangement. So sometimes we'll have one song that we do in multiple ways, or we have different worship leaders that do a song in a different way. We used to have a worship leader that he loved to do what I call the fake ending, where it would like build up and then it would get quiet and people would start clapping, yeah, praise God, and then he'd go to like a slow last verse, slow, quiet last verse, and you're like, oh, false ending. So I would put the other ending in, and anytime he was doing it, instead of ending here, we'd end there, and that would save me some time with arrangements. Do we have any other questions that I can go through, or do you want me to just continue on talking? Because I can absolutely continue talking for a few more minutes. But can you rename a template group? Yes, DD, that is not a dumb question at all. If you go into Arrangement Manager here and click on it, then I could call this longer version. Or you might actually want it to be something else. So that is the best way to do that, I think. You can also duplicate it there if you want to start out from a starting point, but you just want to. Actually, let me just go back into Arrangement Manager. So let's say that the longer version is exactly what you want, except it needs something else, or it needs to have like not something else. So I'm going to call that longer version copy 1 is what it says by that. I'm actually going to call that even longer version. So now when I make sure even longer version is chosen, then I can add one more group on the end and I'm done. So I didn't have to start out with the master that only had this and add in everything. I started out with the one that was similar and then I added. Or I could start out with one that's similar and remove, or add and remove. So that's pretty cool as well. Oh, so a group. So here we have a group. Right click, group labels. So you can add other labels by going to other, or up here in ProPresenter Preferences, we click here, and then here we have labels. So group labels. So if instead of verse 1, I wanted that to be verse A, I could change it there. Now, I believe I'm right that that doesn't automatically change it in all the ones that you've already made. Yeah, it doesn't. So if I would need to reapply that. So right click, group label, verse A, and now it's changed. So notice we've got verse A and verse A. So it doesn't automatically change it, but that's where you would do it. So if you didn't like the way it was labeled initially, you can change that. Like for instance, right now we have one template group. Oh, a template group. Guess my coffee hasn't kicked in. That's called test, but we actually use it for all the songs in our blended service within formatting on the template group. Yeah, let's see here. Template. I believe you go into, let's see here. Let's change this one because I don't do stuff with that client anymore. Is it in template editor? No. I think you actually have to do that in the file itself and restart ProPresenter. Let's see here. So let's see real quick. Yeah, it makes sense, Dee Dee. I'm just trying to remember how that is done. So templates, okay. So Deca VA, oops. I'm going to change that to 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I believe that I can just double click on that and that template should be there. If not, restarting ProPresenter would do it. Yeah, I think I would need to restart ProPresenter. But I think that's how you do it. It's been a while since I've renamed templates. So just to recap how I did that, I went to Preferences and then Support Files, clicked on that, and then in the ProPresenter 6 folder, I opened that up. And in that, there was a template folder, and I renamed the thing. So I think that that would work. So any other questions? It's 1 p.m. here. That means it is 1800 UTC or 10 a.m. Pacific. So it's been about an hour that we're going. Don't forget that deal where you can lock in 20% off, and I'll try and upload this a little bit later, and so people can watch it at their leisure. But I really think that they're better live in general. So I try and get people here live because, you know, you can ask questions, you can help me clarify, because I have the curse of knowledge when it comes to ProPresenter. Sometimes I forget what I know and I just gloss on past something that you really need to know. So that is just one of the downsides, and you asking questions helps make that easier and more clear. So thank you for asking your questions, and thank you for just letting me do this. I don't take it lightly that I get to do what I feel like I was made to do. So thank you very, very much. And we'll see the next time I have one of these. I don't know whether I'm going to do one next Thursday or maybe a different time, or maybe I'm going to do something else. We'll see. But thanks for joining me. And until next time, I will see you then, and go out and change eternity, y'all.